Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and this is going to be episode 12 of my series, What Gear is My Gear? The series where I look at what gear I have chosen to keep around as reference pieces, or either for personal listening enjoyment or for review work, and very often those two categories overlap. The subject of today's episode is the LampizatOr Baltic 3 DAC. This, when it was a brand new unit, sold for about $6,600 US. The updated version is the Baltic 4, and that is currently listing on LampizatOr's website for $6,850 US. Now, it should be mentioned here that this unit then is a discontinued model. You can't just go out and buy a LampizatOr Baltic 3 anymore, at least not brand new. It has been replaced with the 4 on there. So what is the purpose of this video? Well, I have named this DAC here several times in recent videos as a reference piece, as a new reference for me in there. So what I'm going to do in this video is talk about the sound of this unit so that in future videos, when I say I used the LampizatOr Baltic 3 DAC, you have a little bit more context for what that actually means. So in many ways, this video here is going to be a viewer-reviewer relationship building video, so that again, when I say, yeah, I use the LampizatOr Baltic 3 to test the headphone or the amplifier or whatever the case may be in that moment, you again have a little bit better understanding of what my ears hear when I listen to this DAC. So stick around after shameless self-promotion and then listen to me tell you why I picked this one up and why I'm keeping it around for a good while as a reference piece for both personal listening enjoyment and review work. Here we go.
Hello. I'm one of the reasons that Wave Theory can't spend all of his money on audio gear. He wants you to know that your support is vital for keeping the channel running. So if you enjoy Wave Theory's bussin' review riz and no-cap review style and want to encourage him to stay in the basement so I don't have to listen to his dad jokes as much, like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also send him a donation on PayPal or sign up for the Patreon. Links are in the description. Now on to the review.
Alright, why is the LampizatOr Baltic 3 here, and why am I going to keep it around for a good while? The long story short version of this is when I recently acquired my new LTA Z10E amplifier. That's actually right up over my left shoulder here on the rack behind me, and the Baltic sits in the space right below it. Alright, well, I mean, I love that Z10E. I just reviewed it. See a link down in the description for that review video. It is like my new reference amp for just about everything. Okay, but the one thing that happened with that amp there is that when it was paired with my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 DAC, which was the subject of episode 1 of this series, okay, I will put a link to the playlist for this series down in the description so you can watch that too, is those two pieces were not the best complement to each other. Both of them are excellent. I still love the Berkeley Alpha Series 2. I still plan to keep it around and use it as a reference piece, and I really love that LTA Z10E. But it's kind of a very neutral and incisive signature from the Berkeley into a very neutral sound signature on the LTA. And I personally am a listener who likes just a little bit more warmth and a little bit more low-end humph, okay? Just a little bit more like oomph and energy and power in the sub bass than that combo was capable of giving me, okay? Enter LampizatOr. What happened here last summer, and that would be summer of 2023. For context, I'm filming this in late November of 2024. But in the summer of 2023, I had the privilege of having the LTA MZ3 tube amplifier in, as well as the LampizatOr Amber 3 DAC. And I found that those two paired together really, really well. You had the neutrality of the LTA house sound with a warmer, thicker, fuller, and very dynamically impactful low end from the Amber 3. So the gears got to turn in my head when I got that LTA Z10E, and I said, you know what, if I pair that with a LampizatOr DAC, I'll probably get that low-end heft and impact that I am looking for. Now, efforts to do that in the past, to get a warmer and fuller and more impactful DAC than my Berkeley in here, have often come up empty, because I have found that very often that sound usually is not as resolving, at least at prices lower than about 5,000 US dollars. And for context, that Berkeley Alpha Series 2 was a $5,500 unit when it was in its heyday in the mid 2010s, right around in there. And so very often you can get a warm, smooth, slammy, DAC, like a lot of the shit DACs out there, for example, all that, but those were not as resolving or as detailed or as holographic as what my Berkeley would give me. And so I would, even though I got the extra low-end power from those DACs, I was missing a lot of the other things that I value about sound, with detail retrieval, resolution, holography, and that sort of thing with those. So the Berkeley it stood the test of time in my system because of those traits right there. And it's a fairly dynamic DAC in its own right. It just doesn't have quite the low-end heft that I was looking for in combination with the LTA sound. You put the Berkeley with something like the Nimbus HPA US5 or my Vioelectric HPA V281 or the HiFiMan Golden Wave Prelude. Those are amps that you've heard me talk about and use a lot on this channel too. Like those amps have a warmer, thicker sound, so they matched well with the Berkeley. But again, that LTA is a little bit more neutral in there. And so so the experience with the Amber 3 and the MZ3 told me that the Lampizator plus LTA combo is probably up my alley, and then it just turns out that the Baltic 3 is in the price range where I could reasonably expect it to at least compete with my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 in terms of detail and resolution and holography and that sort of thing. So shortly after I acquired the Z10E, I saw a listing on US Audio Mart for this Baltic 3 unit that was pretty close to 50% retail on that, and so I very quickly sold some things and that sort of thing to make room for it, money-wise, to get in here, and so I picked that up. And so thanks to that seller out there, it was a great experience in there as working with that person. So thanks a lot here. And now I get a chance to finally talk about this. And so I've kind of already explained a lot of why I keep it around. So just let me go into the sound here. I've told you why it's here. Let me just go into more details on that sound. Okay, so this, and I have found here that through the Amber 3 and now the Baltic 3, if you are into a very neutral sound signature, at least so far in my experience, Lampizator is really not the brand for you. This one and the Amber 3 even more so. So this one's not quite as extreme as the Amber 3 on this, but it is a neutral, warm kind of a signature. And again, it has a little bit of sub-bass emphasis to it. Meaning there is more sub-bass presence. So there's almost like a sub-bass shelf to it compared to many other DACs that I have had experience with. And then it is also has a lot of physicality in that low end. It is really hard hitting. So it digs deep, it rumbles, and it hits hard. It brings in that added low-end energy that I wanted with the Z10E, okay? And the Z10E has plenty of power to let all of that through. And so the two of them together really scratch my itch there in terms of my bass head needs, okay, on that aspect there. Okay, but the goodness doesn't stop there. The overall just like weight and fullness of the Lampizator sound is on the heavier and thicker side too. To my ears, never to the point where it sounds like overly tubby or bloated or too thick or stuck in the mud. It just has a lot of weight behind and fullness behind its individual tones. Now, the Baltic, not quite as much as the Amber did. Like Lampizator's approach with the Baltic was to be a little bit closer to neutral, and both in terms of tone and then also that thickness and fullness. At least that is my understanding and what I have read about it. And so the Baltic does take a step towards that in a way that the Amber did not, but it's still a Lampizator, so it still has a lot of tonal weight and density and heft to its presentation in there as well. Okay, but the resolution and the detail retrieval are outstanding. With the stock tubes, these are not the stock tubes up there. The stock tubes that came with it are like, I think there was a Mullard branded 12AU7. Those are the small tubes in the back, which you probably can't see. You can barely see one poking around behind this guy here in the image, it looks like. And then there's another one, okay, back over here, 12AU7. Okay, it was Mullard branded 12AU7s that came with this, all right, made in Russia, I believe. They've been around for a while, probably part of LampizatOr stock. Then there's a pair of 6SN7 right here, and then there is a 5Y3 rectifier tube here up front. Okay, I have put in Ray Tubes 12AU7 Select back here. These are Ray 6SN7 Reserve, and this is a Sylvania Nas. I forget exactly the model number, but I can put it down in the description. Okay, along with a link to where I got it, because I think there's still some of those available there in the rectifier slot. With the stock tubes, though, which again, with that Mullard branded 12AU7, and then there's a pair of Pavane 6SN7, they're like the blue globe type, okay, on there. And then there was like a generic, I think Chinese-made 5Y3 tube, a bigger one. It's like a 12AS7 kind of form factor in there. The resolution and the detail retrieval was like probably right there tied with my Berkeley Alpha Series 2, and also that with the holography and just like the three-dimensionality and the imaging and the separation and the depth and the layering and all of that was right there tied and gave me that low-end heft. So I'm like, there it is, I found it, I got what I needed in there. But when I put this tube complement in there, the Ray tubes in particular, it just opened it up even more. I got more detail retrieval, I got more resolution, I got more holography, I got even better timbre, and all that without really sacrificing much in the way of tone or that low-end heft or that overall tonal density that I mentioned earlier. And so this now is the most resolving DAC that I have on hand. It is the most holographic DAC that I have on hand. It's also the most dynamically impactful DAC and probably has the most realistic, natural, and organic timbre to it, top to bottom there, again, with those Ray tubes in there in particular. So, that's why I have it now. It is a fantastic match to more neutral sounding amps, particularly my LTA Z10E up there. That combo is magic in there. And it gives me all of the technical goodness that I loved about my Berkeley Alpha Series 2, but now just a little bit more, especially with the tube rolling here. And then of course it gives me that low end heft, dynamics, and power that I was looking for in there to match with my Z10E. So I really love the sound of this unit, okay? There is my description of it. So in future videos, when I say LampizatOr Baltic 3, what does it sound like? Well, there you go. Hopefully you get a little bit better idea of what that means. So it's going to be a reference DAC for me for quite a while. Now notice I didn't say the reference DAC. And again, it is worth repeating, like there is a bit of sonic coloration here. Like if you want just dead neutral, okay, don't mess with the sound. Again, this is probably not the DAC for you. That is a lot what my Berkeley does. And so my Berkeley is going to stick around because I cannot guarantee that every amplifier or headphone or anything that I get in for review is going to react well to what this does. Okay, I know my Z10E does, so that's fine, but I can't control every single amplifier that comes in. So that Berkeley Alpha Series 2 is staying because I'm going to need its more neutral, right down the middle kind of sound as an evaluative tool as well. So the two of them complement each other so well in that regard in terms of having the two different sound signatures. And I sit here and pinch myself and think about the and kind of chuckle about the embarrassment of riches that it is to have that Berkeley Alpha Series 2 and this LampizatOr Baltic 3 DAC in-house at the same time. It's been quite a ride. Okay. All right, but there is my description of the LampizatOr Baltic 3's sound. I'll take a minute or two here and just talk about its ergonomics here quickly, because anyone out there who may be considering getting a LampizatOr Baltic 4, I believe the operation is very, very similar. Okay, they have changed DAC engines in it. So the DAC engine in this one is their 53. Okay, model 53 for the DAC engine there, which whatever lamp that means to LampizatOr. Now, I did find out in talking with a LampizatOr rep that LampizatOr DACs are Delta Sigma at their core. So whatever DAC engine they build around, it's around a Delta Sigma a DAC chip, basically, and therefore digital to analog conversion. They also don't believe in hardware filtering. So there are no onboard digital filters here. It is an inherently NOS DAC, and that is true of all LampizatOrs, according to the rep that I spoke with. So that may or may not matter to you, but that has been my experience here as well. I have found this to sound great with PCM files up to 192 kilohertz and DSD64. It sounds really good on DSD256 when I've done some upsampling with like HQ player and all of that. I don't love its sound with 384 kilohertz files, okay, 384 kilohertz PCM files in there yet. I've done that with some external sampling. With PCM files, it seems much more comfortable there with more everyday kinds of sampling rates, and I define that to be 44.1 kilohertz through 192 kilohertz. Okay, is that the same with the Baltic 4 with its new DAC engine? I don't know. I cannot say in there. I'm just telling you what my experience with the Baltic 3 is like. But in terms of operation, this unit here, this front panel button right here that has a nice blue glowing ring around it, is an input selector button of sorts. When it is pushed all the way in, the USB input is selected. When it's out, the SPDIF input is selected. And on the back, there is a dial that rotates through the different SPDIF options. This unit, I believe, has an AES, and then it has an RCA coax and an SPDIF, and then a BNC coax input on it for SPDIF. Some units out there will have a Tuslink in there instead of one of those coax flavors. Okay, and so forth. And then there's also a dial on the back there that you rotate through the different SPDIF sources. So if you have lots of different digital sources, this could be a little bit of an ergonomic problem. And again, as far as I can tell, the Baltic 4 has similar operation to it. The other thing, and this is the biggest knock that I have against this unit, is the power switch is on the back. And I find that it doesn't need a ton of warm-up time to really get into it and into sounding great and all that. You just need the tube warm-up time, which isn't all that long, okay, at least on this unit. But you're going to burn through the tube life of your tubes faster if you don't turn the unit off. So if that's going to bother you, leaving the tubes on is going to bother you, then you might want to make sure that on whatever rack you put this thing in, that you can easily get to the back panel for the power. Or you can get an option to make this button the power switch. Now that may or may not fit your needs, but that is an option that at least was true on the Baltic 3. It's at least worth asking if that's an option on the Baltic 4. And then again, the only reason that really matters is, like, most vacuum tubes will give you at least 10,000 good hours of operation. All right, but you burn through 10,000 hours, 10,000 usable hours a lot faster if you leave those tubes on all the time and never turn the unit off, right? So I have it on my rack, and I've made sure that I can get around behind it and find the power switch, which is a nice big rocker switch, easy to find, okay, and all of that by feel. And there's not a whole lot of wires around it, so there's not really anything to knock loose or anything like that. It's located well, it's nice and big, easy to find. It's just on the back, and that is one thing that I don't love about the operation of this unit, okay? But that is about it. Right, it has enough digital inputs for my needs, and then again, I've already gone through the sonic description, which I think is really good. So there we go. There are my thoughts here on the LampizatOr Baltic 3. Again, you can't just go out and buy the 3 anymore, because the 4 is the model that LampizatOr is currently selling, and I have not heard that one to be able to give it a full review. So this video is just about the sound of the Baltic 3, and it helps you understand me a little bit better in future videos when I say, yeah, I use the LampizatOr Baltic 3 as a source piece. Okay, now you have a a more thorough sonic description. All right, I'm Wave Theory. Thanks for watching this video. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. Check out my PayPal, my Patreon, and generally do those things you do to support YouTube channels. Thanks again for watching, and as always, enjoy the music.